Hey guys, Journey to Truth is going to Hawaii. Join us in 2026 for Journey to Truth's first ever vacation conference on the Big Island at the beautiful Queen Emma Community Center in Kona. Enjoy Hawaii as we travel to sacred sites and connect with our Lemurian past and reactivate the land. It's time to get our bodies moving and take a boots on the ground approach to the awakening. We'll also be making a trip to Volcano National Park to pay our respect to Pele, the goddess of fire. We'll then journey to the water for an ocean adventure with our multi-dimensional aquatic family. We'll gear up and head to the harbor as we set sail under the sun for an activating day on the water while we experience the Hawaiian ocean life like never before. Enjoy Hawaiian sunsets and walks on the beach while connecting with Soul Family and learning a few things from our amazing lineup of speakers. Aloha! Grab your ticket today at journeytotruth.online and join us for this once-in-a-lifetime activating getaway.
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Hey guys, welcome back to the show. So as you may notice, I'm doing another in-person interview, but this time it's with Zaysan. It's 2 in a row. I know we're always via Zoom, but it's kind of nice meeting these people in person. And I was up in the astral realm last night traveling around, and we ran into each other and decided to do an interview. So we met up here and got an Airbnb, and we're going to do an interview about some of his recent travels with his family. And if you don't know his story, I highly recommend going back and watching the first 2 episodes that we did with him. It kind of gives a baseline of his ET experience, which is one of the most profound experiences in my opinion. So I'm so excited to dive even deeper because you're constantly in communication with your star family, I guess you could call them. And you've been telling me some amazing things about a recent trip you were just on. And, you know, for people who don't know, maybe you can explain how one of these trips actually takes place. So you're physically leaving the planet and going on a journey with extraterrestrials, for lack of a better term, and coming back and writing books about it. And your most recent trip, you got to witness something pretty amazing. So I'd like to just start with that and let you explain, you know, what you saw and what you learned, what that was like.
Yeah, to put it in context, basically what happened was that I got an invite from the elders, the Plejaren elders, to meet with them to share consciousness. And what that means, it's kind of complicated for a lot of people, but it's very simple. They would expect them to be asking me questions and things like that, but it was just the relationship that I've been having with this, what I call my family, including Sam Jess, who is quantum entanglement. In other words, she's me and I'm her, but our planes of existence had crossed and we merged into this one projection. And the process was, well, they have been following us, the elders and other people, because of the relationships that we are creating. And so they invited us to come and share consciousness. And when we arrived, it was a long journey. And then when we got there, we went through a process, and, you know, there's these big doors, and, you know, I'm expecting something grandiose or something. But when we went in and we're in front of them, they were kind of sitting in front of us, and we couldn't see all of them. It was kind of like a light above them, and they were sitting in chairs. And when the one would speak, then the light would come so we could see that figure. And I describe them in the book, or the book that's coming. And anyways, they just wanted to meet us, say hello, and, you know, feel it. And if you read my books, you'll understand the sharing of consciousness, because we create everything in the stream of consciousness before we come here. That's why a lot of things seem like it's already happened. But anyways, we went through and met all of the elders, and with that meeting, and that was it, right? We just said hi, basically, and it was over. And so later they contacted us and asked us if we would like to do something that's kind of special that they don't really allow people to do. And that was to witness the birth of a universe. And so it was like, yeah, sure, you know, I'm in. And so what we did was first, Sam Jess took me aside and took me into like what we call travel, and showed me the universe within us. Each one of us carries a universe within us, and it's non-dimensional. Just like that's a big word that's coming up in all this is the experience, to experience it in a non-dimensional way. So that means there's like no me, and we're scattered and that sort of thing. You can look that up. But
You mean like scattered as in particles?
yeah. But we're still a being,
Right.
a consciousness.
Okay.
And the consciousness is what keeps us together and sends us apart, and so on and so forth. And so actually we were actually going within ourselves to discover this universe and to see what it was like and what the feeling was. And it was very awkward because, you lose all of your senses, but you gain other senses, but you don't recognize them right away because you've never used them that you consciously remember. And so, after that experience, it was like, this is such a mind bender, trying to grasp what it was I just witnessed and experienced. And the way Sam Jess explained it to me was that it's not overwhelming because we're not learning anything. We're just experiencing it and remembering. Because if we remember, there's always plenty of space up here in the mind, right, in order to keep it. So anyways, as it goes, we arranged to go to see this birthing. And it was at a very long distance, even for them, right? And so once we got there, we had to have a special ship in order to take us near it, the rip in the fabric of space. And inside that rip was where the universe was being created. And so one of the reason they don't have people enter into that is because you become part of its creation. And, whatever that means, right? I guess to be a participant or a witness. And so when we went to leave the ship, I had to wear this spacesuit that was different than the ones I'm accustomed to. But it was very tight, but you didn't feel it as tight. And it was shallow. It was very small in comparison, like where the other ones have a larger helmet and things like that. But so anyways, we go out from the ship and we just step off. And there's a vacuum that's pulling us from the tear in fabric. And as we enter into that tear, we just disassemble in a sense. And it was kind of odd and kind of freaky at the first. And because there's no body and nothing seems right, but your awareness is absolutely there. So the consciousness is complete and 100% the whole time. And so what I was seeing was members of the family like Hans and Franz and Laura, and they were just breaking apart into like litter almost. And you would see them coil and spin. And they were always making geometric type shapes as they moved through it. And I could recognize who each one of them was. And I could see the Sam Jess, and I could feel everything. And I was emotionally connected to each and every one of them. But we weren't different. We were completely, in other words, I was in a place that did not recognize. Right. There was nothing to have a frame of reference to, yet I could see it. And as it was happening, and it was just absolutely incredible. And the feeling that was in it, well, you could feel things coming together, I guess is the way to say it, as though it was making itself. And so we spent time in there, and then once we had the feel of it, it was time to go, and we could feel a pull. As we got closer to the tear, we could feel the pull pulling us out of it. And it was gentle and everything, but we knew what was happening. And just as we entered or left the tear, we reformed as what we were. And, all of us were kind of baffled by what we had just witnessed. It was such beauty and warmth. You felt so good from it. It's like there was no pain, nothing going on. And then we just sort of made our way back to the ship. But I noticed I kept looking back, and when I looked back, I could see the others were doing the same thing, right? Like, what did we just witness? It was just so beautiful. And the love was just like at maximum. The feeling, it was just a natural feeling that you got, what you were just witnessing, and the feelings that we were getting while participating in it and becoming a part of it. And then we got back in the ship, and that was kind of the end.
Right. So you're describing the quantum mechanics in a way that people are just still trying to figure out here on Earth. And I know you have a friend of yours who's a researcher who teaches that type of stuff. And when you shared this with him, his response was surprising because he was like, how do you know this stuff? You know, how could you know this stuff? So maybe you can kind of explain what that was like sharing it with him and his feedback.
Well, it's interesting, you know, I had no clue what quantum was. And when I first started to experience all these things, these geometric shapes would show up, and then Sam Jess and me would travel, what we call travel, which is like, you know, leaving the body in a sense, but you're taking the body with you both at the same time. And there's no such thing as time and place. So, you know, that's a whole nother thing where you argue about, but he was giving me the references and describing the things that we were experiencing, like the experiencer and the observer at the same time or separately. And, you know, when we follow straight lines or things, there was always a reason for that. And like the coils, the reasons for the coils, like there's things in the quantum, like you're always in the quantum fluid. And when you're in the quantum fluid, you don't see the color until you recognize it. Those sort of things, right? So it kind of really strains your brain in all of those ways. But you see, like, and it's cool to see, like, the scientists struggling, trying to figure out, like, the quantum mechanics and how it works and everything. And it's so funny. I've got the answers, right? And it's because it's alive. They haven't recognized that the quantum is actually alive. So when they, you know, are positioning things and they can't control them because they move without direction and everything, it's because it's alive. And when you're experiencing the quantum, when you recognize that you're within the quantum, you understand that's the source of all things, you know, whether it be what your God is or whatever it may be. That's what was being talked about. There's no time, no distance, no body, no me, in a sense, because we're just a fragment of essence that we have what I call consciousness, which is in the book too. You know, you have this big puzzle board of consciousness, and then we take a fragment of the essence of ourselves and place it on that consciousness. And then we never actually are here. We're a projection. And so while we experience this life, other people call it other lives. Well, you can have more than one, working on more than one plane of existence at a time. And then I found out that there's multiple types of planes of existence. The ones that we recognize as like human, you know, or that something similar to that. And so with each plane of existence are multiple dimensions. And on those multiple dimensions, each one of them is an aspect of ourself, which means a life. So each projection is one of those dimensions. And then that's strung out, but that's not all that we are, and that's not all that we do, because we live on multiple planes of existence in other dimensions, with other types of dimensions, which is the ethereal, you know, light body, and all these other ones that are taking place all at the same time. And for me, Homer in space, when they start talking about this stuff, it's like stop, just let me have this one, you know.
Right.
Yeah, it makes more sense that way. But so
yeah, it's got to be overwhelming. I mean, for anyone just tuning into this, like it's a hard to believe story if you're a skeptic, right? What's happened to Zaysan, but we've interviewed him a number of times. I'm spending some time here with him in person, and he spoke at our conference, and I will vouch for him. I think he's absolutely credible, and his experiences are real. And the more you talk to him, the more that becomes apparent. And I just wanted to throw that out there for anyone who's like, what the hell is he talking about? So when you're experiencing things like this that very few people, if any, get to experience, you're going to go into this quantum realm, right?
Yeah.
And then come back with this fundamental understanding that you now have to try to put into words, which is nearly impossible, probably. Yeah. So I appreciate you trying to do your best, because I don't know if you know, some people might get lost in that explanation, but it makes sense to me. Because there's, you know, infinite amount of possibilities and probabilities. Yeah. I mean, that's what superposition is in quantum mechanics. Mm-hmm. And then the single position is the collapse of that wave function down to the single reality that's created by the observer. Mm-hmm. So I understand when you're like, whoa, like just let me focus on this one, because that's what we're used to. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, it's got to be interesting to go up there and have that experience and then come back and to this very dense reality and keep living your life. So what is that dichotomy like?
Well, in the very beginning, I called it becoming naked, because one of the things that in order for me to be on that ship, I mean, I call it accidental contact, but as we know, you know, there's no accidents, but in relation to that, to make it make sense, it was like an accident, how I met her and stuff. And then as I'm with them, it was a requirement that I not hide anything. You have to be 100% open. And, you know, it's easy to say that you can do that until you have to do it. And it gets very, very difficult. And so I had this experience with, as we're talking, there's multiple things that happen, but one of the experiences that was like maybe the end to it for me was when they scan you when you go in and they remove all the bugs off your body and then they replace them and to maintain the process. And so you're kind of sterile, but they also see your entire body, and they saw all the scars and the bullet holes in me and stuff like that. And they asked, what's this all about? Because they perceived us, they weren't trained to be in the contact work or anything. And they said, what is all of this? And I'm thinking, oh my God, you know, now they see us as monsters, you know, violence and stuff like that. And so they're afraid of me already. And so when they ask me that question, I don't have any choice. I have to answer them. I have to tell them the truth, and I can't hold anything back. I can't make it look softer or anything else. And I was really confused on how I was going to present this to them. And the only thing I could think of was I had been using movies to help explain stuff to them. And I picked the story Taken. Not necessarily that I'm anything like that, but the object was that people will put themselves in harm's way to, you know, for the love of family or other ones. And they understand love, you know, it's essential to do what they do. And so anyways, I take Sam Jess alone and to her place, and we get in her bed and she creates a screen so she can watch it. And I'm thinking that I'm just showing it to her because I want to get her feedback before we move into the others. But as it's playing, I can hear other people, the other people in the family out there, and they're following the movie. And I thought, crap, I'm in trouble now, you know, because it's already going to be exposed. And then right at the end, I see so much emotion coming from Sam Jess, where she just reaches up and gets right when the guy saves his daughter and gets right in the screen, and she's tearing and all this stuff and very emotional, right? And so after it's over, she just jumps over me and takes off. And I got addicted to their coffee. It's just the best in the world, right? So I figure, well, it's only a matter of time now. My time with them is numbered, and I didn't want to leave them because of the things that I was experiencing with them and the love. And I couldn't have imagined the things I understood about myself just from what it helped me learn. Like, we become more, and we have that all available to us. It's just that we're stuck in the survival mode, which is the brain rather than the mind. And so anyways, I'm sipping my coffee, trying to nurse it as long as I can. And then Sam Jess comes in and says, okay, everybody wants to see you, you know, on the living room. I call it the living room. It's the front of the ship. And anyway, so I go out there thinking, oh crap, I hate this, you know, and I'm going through this emotion that they're going to throw my ass out now and that stuff. And so I get out there, and it's a funny thing. Like, when I do speeches for the Quest and everything, talking about the child trafficking, and I go to a church or something, and the pastor usually invites other pastors from other churches for whatever I'm going to talk about. And at the end, they do the lay of hands on. And it's never been a thing for me, but when they did that, you know, I feel this real power, you know, I feel the love that's coming from these people. So when I'm on the ship, I walk out into that crowd, and they're all teary-eyed and everything, and that's what they do. But when they did it to me, when they touched me, I just boom right to the floor, and I could just feel like this flush come out of me. And it was the love. That's what a lot of people don't understand about the love. It's the emotion, it's the expression, and the genuine love. And it just flushed me out. And so ever since then, I started to understand, and I explained about the parts, how you activate what we call magic. We are capable of itself. And they really like the expression that I use with about what Jesus said after he healed a bunch of people. He said, you, the people of this earth, can do all that I can do and more. And that's what I now is starting to understand what they meant, because when they first met me, they explained to me that we're equals. Right. And I didn't really understand much of that. But I think the key words to fill that is that we think that when you're there that you're learning all these new things, and you're really not. You're just remembering. Right. So there's always space, right?
Right. So what's that, to kind of, you answered part of the question. So when you come back here to Earth, like what's that like getting like used to this reality? What's the difference for you here? Is it hard? Is it difficult for you to be down here, or is it a relief to be back?
It's a little of both. It's kind of a mixed bag, but I'm quite different than most people. And it's like they want me to be with them, to stay with them and stuff. I have that permission, but I can't because I've got responsibilities here, and I believe that's as important as being with them. I run the quest to save the kids, and I also do some work, and I also have a life here. You know, I've been here for a long time, so I've established friends and things like that, and so I stay connected. But then I'll feel this urge, right, that I need to be back with them. And so for the longest time, how that worked, this is the fun part of it, how that worked was I would go and walk into my hallway, and I'd see this blue light, and I'd just step into it. So one step into it, and the next step was I was on the ship. And that has to do with the way that they move their ships and things like that. It's all connected to frequency and unique frequencies. And so I got really used to that, right? And then I noticed like they would take like 20-minute breaks now and then throughout, you know, a 24-hour period, our 24-hour period.
You mean like their rest
Yeah.
period? They don't sleep. They take 20-minute rest period.
Yeah, where they just like sort of like meditate, something similar to that. But what they're doing is accessing the consciousness, the streams of consciousness. So in that process, they're able to communicate to multiple people, even thousands of people. And they may not be fully aware of a lot of them, maybe 5 or 6 of them, but the rest they're not fully conscious of. But the projection of themselves with these other people, they can remember if they wish to single any of those out, and they're fully conscious in speaking to whoever it is that they're communicating with, right? Mm-hmm. But they mostly focus on like 5 or so, and they'll have experiences, and they're good to go after that, you know? And so it was one day we were on Sam Jess's island in her house, and we had a campfire and stuff, and they invited me to take a rest period with them. And I thought, wow, that's cool, you know? Mm-hmm. And so I went in there and I sat down next to him, and she said, just empty yourself out and relax, fully relax and breathe. And I started doing that, and it's like, I'm not seeing anything. Don't feel like I'm resting. Nothing seems to be happening. And so I'm saying to myself, damn, it's not working. And then I hear Sam Jess in my head, and she's like, it is, you're there. And right then I just felt so comfortable. And when I did that, I started to see things. The first thing I saw was like my old grandmother, my Lithuanian grandmother, way back when, you know, when I was a little kid, and I was never felt like I was that connected to her because I was young, and, you know, she passed away before I got older. But I recognized everything that was happening. She's cutting peas, you know, splitting peas and stuff like that, and putting them in water and all this outside. And it was like I didn't realize how connected or how much influence she had on me in my life. And then the next thing I see is this cat that I had for 26 years, and she came at me and just walked right through me, and I could feel this warmth and this love that was taking place. Next thing I know, I'm on this rock, and on this rock that I remember, you know, it was out in the desert, and this precambrian blue rock, and there's a stream right next to it. It's just this beautiful place. And as I'm laying there, I feel the warmth of the rock and the sun, and I look up and I see this hawk, and next thing I know, I could see the wings side of me. I was actually inside the hawk, and I was seeing through the hawk's eyes. And then I returned back to this rock, and it felt like a lot of time had passed, right? And then Sam Jess nudges me, and she goes, get up, get up. And so I wake up and I go, oh man, I said, I'm sorry. How long was I gone? You know, and she goes, 20 minutes. And I had this full experience in that short time. And see, that's related to what I started to understand about, like they talked about, you know, like I was describing before, you have the plane of existence. And in one of those dimensions is me. That's the projection of me here on Earth. And the thing is that it's not just that. It can be so much more, like everything else. And when I learned to the rest period, I didn't realize that I was actually in that place. And how it come to be was they described this to me, and they explained it to me, and said that, you know, when I come on a ship now, that I can remain home, and I can also be there with them. And that's physical, both places. And so not just imagination or something. And one has to rest while the other one can be fully active. If this body is active, then that body has less energy. So you have to deal with that. But so the next time I started feeling missing them. I wanted to go see them. I walked in the hallway like I always do, and it was nothing. It's like, what? And I did it again and again, and it wasn't working. And so, the only thing I could think of was just think of Sam Jess and feel the love, right? And so I started feeling the love and everything. And suddenly I could see her, and she was like writing on this, like they create there's no board there, but they create one and they're like writing on it. She's doing some kind of calculations. And I'm sitting there watching her, just feeling the love that I have for her as well as the rest of the family. And I could see her kind of turn her head just slightly and see it kind of crack a smile. Mm-hmm. I said, "You see me?" And that she says, "Yes, this is what you did." And I said, "But why did you take away my other way, where I can just come here, my one body?" And she goes, "Because you need to understand this. This is part of what you're capable of." And she wanted me to experience it for myself. And so that went on for a little while, and I kept bugging them. I said, "Can I just come the old-fashioned way?" Right. And yeah, they agree I can do either one. But it is that you do have the possibility of splitting that aspect of yourself from more than one person, right, in a sense, and being to more than one place. Not bilocate, but being in more than one place.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. So, okay, you explained to me the other day, basically you witnessed a terraforming of a planet. Mm-hmm. Just explain that whole process, because I found it absolutely fascinating, from beginning to end, what that was like from what you understand.
Yeah, it actually took a period of time, but I was out learning to fly the pods, right, by myself. And I was with Hans, and I know he's just a really fun guy. And anyway, we're flying around, and he takes me to this, what was a planet they have developed yet. And we could see that there's oceans and stuff like that. And it looked similar, very similar to Earth and everything, but it didn't have a lot of life on it or anything. And we weren't able to get out because there was toxicities that could affect us, and we weren't prepared for that. And so anyways, we flew around and he showed me things, and there wasn't really too much foliage anywhere, trees or anything. And so he explained to me that they had decided to begin terraforming this planet. And how that process works is they take the makeup of this, and there's people out there that's all they do. They like animals, insects, and everything that connects, one thing to another to create it. But due to natural law, they cannot alter the place in any way that it couldn't become it on its own. Right. And so what first happens is they go through and analyze what type of planet to make it, and what kind of plants and all these things, and how many, will benefit, how many type of species can go there and exist without any, need for suits or anything like that. And when they do all this analysis, and within a week, they have the complete plan. And this is unified for several species that do the analysis, so that they can make the most benefit from it and the benefit to the universe. And so they developed the plan. And so the next time that we went to visit it was down the road a ways, and I started to see foliage, small trees and things like that. And then the next time we visited, I actually saw an animal. I couldn't recognize what it was, of course, but there was animals there. And then by the third or fourth time that we went, it was developing. So they rapid grow it in a sense. So within a year, they've already got an actual planet producing oxygen and whatever gases that they need. And they have already integrated the types of bugs and everything in other words, what life they put on there has to benefit, be a benefit to it. And then the next life form benefits that one and the next one. And so everything together creates what will be a stable environment and the layers of the atmosphere. So all those things come together. So the final time that we went, we got to meet some of the people that were there, that were now moving into there. And they had like a guy that do the art and stuff like that and write the history and the process of each step that was taken to get to this point that they were now. And then I met another species of like a bird that came to us. And the thing about creating life is like one of the things that they had mentioned to me at one time was when I was asking them about other things, they said that our scientists here on Earth can take a teaspoon off of a game trail and have 40 years worth of DNA on it. Mm-hmm. So they can manipulate that DNA to create a being, any type and for whatever purpose. And so that's how they decide how to create a being or an animal that would benefit, the land and the people. So anyways, that's how that's.
So the inhabitants, I asked you this the other night, but explain, the inhabitants aren't being born onto this planet with amnesia like on Earth. No. They know exactly what they're, like they move in as if like they're fully aware of that this was a terraformed planet. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's just like, but there's no money out there in space or anything, but they're basically hired, right? They're selected for their ability and their knowledge to fit the position that they need. And so that's how they end up there. And also when people come to visit or something like us, they could show us around and they know about each one of them knows the whole system, but each of them has a specialty. And so, when you ask one thing, they'll take you to this person or that person, right, and stuff. So,
yeah. So okay. How would that compare to the creation of Earth? Was it created in a similar way or completely entirely different from your understanding?
No, it's quite different. There's no evolutionary chain. And the way, like what I call it homerization, because I'm not capable of understanding a lot of the detail and things. And I know when I explain it to myself, that's why I write the diaries. So I have something to remember when I get Alzheimer's or something, Right. And so I explain it in the simplest terms and they help me with that. And so like on Earth, basically the way they taught me was there's a tree and on that tree is a bunch of leaves and each of those leaves is a species. So one of those species will drop down or leaves and take off running, right? And they may exist for a while, they may exist for a long time or totally go extinct. And there are multiple species living at the same time here on Earth. And right now in our time period, ours became the most dominant and most have the ability to survive. But then it'll still be up to us. But if we go extinct, there will be more that come along.
Right. Yeah. So what about the original inhabitants then of Earth? Did you get any information? Were you shown anything?
Not the absolute, because then it gets really complicated about cells and how they manipulate with other in the natural environment, blah, blah, blah.
Right. But the winged beings you were telling me about?
Yeah, there was a coexistence of us, this human that we're here now as, and one of the elongated beings. Like in the beginning, I always say it wrong, but I think you'll understand when the Earth had one island, basically Pangea or whatever.
Pangea,
yeah, Pangea. As it separated, there became 4 different species with elongated heads at different times. Some of them had wings, some of them didn't, but they were evolved and compared to our human species. And so when they met our human species, they could teach us things and showed us around a little bit. But
right. Yeah, and then I asked you this the other night too. Would this be considered the Anunnaki or the Sumerians? You don't have that answer. Right?
The reference to the names that we give aliens don't really fit for me, and I don't recognize those.
Sure.
Yeah. I do recognize like the symbolism of it, like bird people and things like that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. So then, there's so many directions we could go with this. There is no Big Bang, right?
No.
From what you understand, you call it jokingly a big fart.
Yeah.
And maybe you could explain that and what that process looked like.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. I put a lot of things in the book that haven't yet been discovered. And then after it's been published, they start to come along, right? And they're almost there with the Big Bang thing. But they're just not complete. Anyways, what happens is there will be like a tear or rip in the fabric of space. And over a period of time, that starts to heat up. And when it heats up, it starts to foam. And that's ingredients that's being collected as things pass by. Time and space is far different than time here, what we perceive. Multiple generations, thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, like a blink of an eye in space. And so as this foam is coming out, like aliens have figured out, like different species have figured out, especially the ones I'm with, that you can add ingredients to it. But again, you can't add ingredients that it couldn't do on its own. And so to make certain types of planets or types of iron or ores or something like that, right? In Homer's terms. And eventually it gets to a point where it just, like I call it a big fart. And these objects will come out of it, and they're not necessarily spherical or anything like that. It'll be just a hunk of whatever, right? But over thousands or hundreds of thousands of years, they start to spin. They'll catch gravity and things like that, whatever it naturally happens. And in that process, they start to spin. And as they spin, the frequencies of vibrations that are occurring will start to make them more spherical. And so that's how we end up with what we have.
Right. That's so interesting. And then, I mean, so that would be basically the universe that you just witnessed being birthed. You were witnessing that process, but at the very early stages. And you explain it to be one-dimensional or no dimension. No dimension.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's through that process of whatever natural cycle that is that the dimensions are created, like the layers of like how the atmospheres and stuff. Like what does that look like?
Well, it is like just like the planets, how they form and how they end up being spherical. In these births of like universes, what happens is it's layered. So it's just like us, you and me sitting here now, we perceive 2% of what's around us. That's the best that we can do. When there's so many different things around, but we may see them, but we don't recognize them. So our brain doesn't have a reference. So they're not there, right? But when you start to understand them and start to learn of them, or you're brought into a position where you're experiencing it, then you start to recognize it and you start to be able to see it. So when you have a birth of a universe, it depends what you're capable of seeing to what, like we're a three-dimensional world, right? And so maybe that is the only thing we can perceive, or else maybe another being can see more of them. So it's like layers upon layers. Yeah, that's where it gets complicated. When you start explaining it.
I get that. So okay, whenever you've claimed that you've gone up there, but they also come here on occasion. But they can't just come here haphazardly. Like there's a protocol; they have to get permission and go through jump through all these hoops, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very rare when they do get to come here. But they've spent time here. These Plejaren ETs that look human, they just have bigger eyes.
Yeah.
And they can hide easily amongst us. And they've spent some time here with you. And I know you've explained that in previous interviews. But you mentioned that they just can't come. Like they have to run the scenario of whatever they're coming to do through whatever technology it is to see all the probabilities and to see if it could potentially be detrimental. Can you explain that a little bit? Like why that could be detrimental if they just wanted to come like hang out right here with us during this interview or something?
Yeah. They've developed like glasses, like gargoyle glasses, and it's kind of funny. They also tint, depending on the sun, but it minimizes the size of their eyes. Even though that they could be walking, like I've taken her in malls and stuff, and nobody thinks nothing of it because they're so similar to us, and but in their mannerism is what's different. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out why are they spending so much time with me and showing me all these things. And now, after time has passed, I start to see why, because I watch the child in her, right, or in them when they experience something, and they're seeing the same thing from me when they show me or teach me things. And so the process is pretty simple. They send it to like command or wherever. I got to make up words because there isn't any words for how their levels of whatever permissions and stuff. And it's gotten to a point. In the beginning, it was very sketchy, right? Whether they were going to allow this to happen. But they also knew me, and I can't hide anything, and it had become negative, right? In that process. So they understand where my feeling and my energy is coming from when I make an offer like that. And plus, I have a lot of experience in that kind of field of protection and everything. And so, they would grant it. Is limited. And so we did these small excursions, like to the mall and things. And all that stuff is calculated, by other beings that decide whether or not this is working or if this is too dangerous or one thing or another.
Right.
It's not that they're afraid to take risks, and there's also, it's just like, if we go to shoot at a UFO or something, you're only going to hit it if they want you to,
Right.
and it's impossible to beat them. And just like when I met her in the swamp and we went through that process, that's a long story too, but it's in the first book. But as it went through the process, what I didn't know was that at any moment where the captain was watching from the ship, he could have, boom, had her back in the ship, out of harm's way. So it's monitored in that sense.
Right.
So less permission and more monitoring, it would be the thing.
Right. But you you hinted at the other night where it could be almost detrimental in some cases. And I don't understand it. We're just like, we're talking like time travel paradox stuff, like they can affect the timeline if they come in the wrong place or time.
Yeah, that's if they would interject something other than being human. When I bring them here, it's experience only. They're not creating anything, they're not changing anything.
Right.
So that's a safe road to plot. But we, like, for instance, when we got we took a cat back.
Yeah.
We had to interact. And in an interaction, the way it works is how I did it and what they approve of is I would lead the conversation and the direction of what we were doing. And then she just played a person, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to do,
right.
Like a parent and a child, sort of thing. And so there was no, there's no alien thing going on.
So they couldn't interact with me or a stranger or anybody because it could affect the time. It could affect my life. It could affect whoever they interact with, and it could change things.
I would control that conversation,
right?
But just again, it was like a parent and a child, right?
Yeah.
And she would be limited at what she would express to somebody else around them.
Sure.
And she would look to me, so it felt totally normal. And what you would expect from someone. So it was never changing any kind of rhythm or path.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was trying to understand.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's fascinating. And, I was going to ask after that, oh, you took them fishing, which I find interesting. So these are the types of experiences that they have.
Yeah.
And can you explain like how they reacted to the fishing?
Oh, it was so fun. I took a bunch of the guys, and because I had talked to them about it and I showed them like TV shows and stuff, and they were kind of interested in how that works and all. And so I got a Jeep, and so I'm taking them to this place. I know a guy that lets me fish at his place, and so I knew it would be secluded, and there's no visual from the rivers or anything else, so it's very secluded area. And so I took them. Of course, I had to dress them right. Mm-hmm. Had to get them in the garb, and always played jokes with them and things like that, driving over trees and stuff. But I get them back there, and we're all set up, and I'm helping them, learn how to do. You put the bait on, and let it out there, and if you feel something, it just, and they're talking, right? And we brought a cooler of stuff, and so anyways, we're enjoying the time, and that's what I'm explaining to them. You don't have to catch fish to have a good time. A day fishing is a good day, no matter what. And suddenly the captain hooked one, and he was freaking out and like jumping up and down. He didn't know what to do. He suddenly forgot everything I had told him. Yeah. And so I was helping him out, and then he gets it in. He's just bragging about the fish that he caught. And then Hans comes over and he's looking at it and trying to figure out the geometric and, how it works, how the fish works in the water and stuff. Right. And so, that was essentially what we did. Was just teaching them how to go out and have a good time on Earth.
Right. So yeah, it's amazing. It's such an interesting story, and that they don't live in environments that even have those experiences, and we just take that stuff for granted.
Yeah.
So it just kind of reminds us to appreciate like the life here and experience it while we're here instead of trying to escape. Which, we've all been there before. We don't always want to be here. It's tough sometimes, but like I guess through your experience, Does this make you more grateful to be on Earth?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I miss it a lot of times. You know, when I'm up there, it's what I do is I write diaries, and this is my experience. I'm having a relationship with these people, and they've introduced me to other things. And like they said, we're all equals, you know, and then, you know, to understand that, you know, we're just remembering. We already have done it. We already know everything.
Right.
And we're just activating those things again,
Right.
you know, and the brain is always the thing that gets in the way, you know, and I'm having a physical experience. And at the first, I didn't quite understand why I was getting a physical experience, because I saw other ways, you know, that could be possible or potentials. And like, in order to change our consciousness, it doesn't have to be physical. It's kind of a limited aspect. And like recently, what I understood from what they were telling me is like contact will not be a spaceship coming to the ground, getting out, shaking somebody's hand. It's going to be more of a consciousness that we connect to them. And the requirement is a lot of love. And like at first I taught sensing to people in the book, and because that's how I got to understand how to communicate. And what you do is, it's like you see a golden ball and it comes through your head, it's warm, it goes out your feet, and it goes again and again, repetition, until it becomes like you're not even thinking about it anymore, but it's happening. And then what you do is you add on to that a moment of unconditional love that you experienced. It doesn't have to be with a human or anything. It could be with an animal or whatever it was, but you feel that and remember that moment again and again and again until it becomes real again. And when it actually becomes real and you forget that you're just remembering, that's when all the doorways open. And the thing is not to be, you know, expect nothing and appreciate everything, because what you see is what you truly want. You know, whether it be an experience with the aliens or something else completely different.
Right.
But that's the way to access, because it's like we were talking about intent, you know, and it's a bad word in a lot of ways, because when we truly want something, we are creating the intent on a regular basis. But if we sit down suddenly and try to create the intent, we're wiping out everything before that. You know, so you don't need the intent. You already know where it is that you wish to go and wish to seek. And so you just need to believe and trust and experience it.
Right.
You know, and I tell a lot of people, when they get to a point where they open that door and they know they're in the door, and they may or may not see all these other things that are around them suddenly. Right. You know, like I was explaining before, if you have no reference for it, you can't see it. But in that state of mind and consciousness, you may be able to see it. Right. But there should be a being there. And if there's a being there, go to that being, forget everything else, and entirely give your love to that being and allow an eternity for that. And if you allow the eternity for that, of course, it's probably not going to be an eternity, but what you'll get is the complete experience. And then everything else you'll know that was around you. You don't have to figure them out. And a big important part of that is to be in the mind, not into the brain, because the brain's going to try to save you and protect you and create things for you that don't fit. And so you may have a terrible experience because it's not real.
Yeah.
Where in the mind, if you allow that to happen, don't ask questions, just fully experience it. All those answers are already answered. All those questions that you may have had will be answered. And then the things that you still feel more about, it'll come in time. But when it comes through the mind, it'll be pure.
Right.
So it'll be a very genuine experience.
It's being processed through the heart. And that's, you know, it's not just the mind, it's the heart first, the way you make it sound.
Heart, emotion, and feeling.
Yeah, exactly. So you mentioned you got to experience or witness how they fly a craft straight through a mountain. And I showed you a video, and you're like, that kind of looks like a Plejaren craft. And we watched this video, a TFO flying into a mountain. And can you explain, like, how did they explain to you what that process was?
A little bit. I didn't really have to explain much of that because of how they travel. You know, they don't have fuel, they don't have that sort of thing in order to move from one place to another. And for lack of terms, right, in their computer on the ship, wherever they want to go, they'll pick that point in space, and they can see every frequency, because everything has a unique frequency. Every frequency of anything that would be in that space that would be in the way, right? And they also can see up to about 3 seconds in the future through this process because of something maybe coming or whatever. And once they identify every frequency, then they just become that frequency. So they're not flying anywhere, they just become that frequency in another place.
Right.
And so when you go through, like they had a specially designed ship that the captain was all excited to show me. And so some of us got in it, and he took me, and I didn't know what was going on at first, but we were headed right for this mountain, and he said, watch. And it was kind of funny because I felt myself like relaxed. It was like, I shouldn't be relaxed. We're heading right straight for a mountain. But the trust, right? You have that feeling of them. And we went right through the mountain, and it didn't disturb anything. And what that does, it rapidly adjusts to the frequencies of the contents of that mountain.
Right.
And so the ship is becoming it as it goes through, giving you that pocket of protection.
Right.
But that's how that works. And I learned so much more about that, where they took me to a rogue planet where they were creating like a colony within it. And one of the things that was taught about, they showed me so many little things. There's many details I put in the book about it, but essentially through the mind, you can hold this machine that actually pushes that energy or confines it to a certain pattern, that frequency that you're putting out while you imagine something. And I was to imagine what I would like to see in front of me, right? In other words, this part of the structure where these tunnels were coming together. And so I'm seeing it very vividly in my mind. And what I didn't realize until it was happening was that, when you picture something in your head, you get a really good image. But this image that I was seeing was feeling like I was there. And I saw every little detail. And so I'm describing those details. After it was done, they let me see I had created that through the soils and the rocks and everything.
Right.
And all that stuff comes out and it's separated.
Right.
Every particle to what each particle is, they keep it separated. Then they can reuse it or reintegrate it.
Do you think that would explain how some of the ancient structures on this planet were built?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it just doesn't. How did they do that? It looks 3D printed. So it's not like there's machinery involved.
No.
It's consciousness.
Yeah. It's what we're capable of.
Yeah.
Us as humans are actually capable of all these things.
Yeah.
But believe is a big deal. Once you believe, you change things. It's just like we were talking about the water, how you can adjust the water through love or through hate, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You got to believe in this stuff first.
Right.
And then it starts to manifest. And I know it's hard a lot of times, but for me, it was very easy in a sense. It was hard, but at the same time, it's easy because the people that were surrounding me already were that.
Right.
And I believe and trust them fully because they're family to me.
Yeah.
And they taught me about the love, and trying to define love is impossible because it's ever expanding.
Right.
Right. And so all that energy is what creates what we believe today is magic, like walking on water or putting your arms through that's all possible.
Right.
When you believe and you trust in it.
So you mentioned Jesus earlier, and you used him as a reference when you were teaching them. Where does Jesus fit into their timeline, to their narrative? Or is it something entirely separate?
It's separate. They don't really work with that well because it's religions. And I'm not saying it's not true, because it is true, but it may not be true in the way that we perceive it to be.
Right.
And all those things, like in the Bible, those are all true, but a lot of it is corrupted through man and stuff like that. But anyway, the ideas are the same. And you can almost replace God with, not replace, but you can change the form of God into quantum. Because everything that you read in the Bible related to God or whatever, and relationships with God is in the quantum. And it's kind of funny. I don't like to go there.
Yeah, it's in the quantum because the quantum's alive.
Yeah.
It's a living, breathing.
We are the quantum.
Well, we are the quantum. That makes perfect sense to me. I've always, my whole life, Jesus and that whole narrative, which I do believe is real.
Yeah.
But it always felt like it felt like such a small part of the end of the story, like for modern man. But I'm like, why did we only focus on when he came and later? Like, what about all the millions of years, billions of years before that on Earth? And what else? And how does that fit in with the rest of the galaxy and the universe, right?
Yeah.
So I think that makes perfect sense to me. Like, it's almost specific to this planet or this region of the solar system for our evolutionary process, maybe. And then eventually you'll kind of evolve past the need for somebody like that to pull you out of the amnesia, right? Mm-hmm. That's the way I see it.
Yeah, and the way I see it is there's always going to be messengers. And like, what would, if we went and taught quantum to people back in that time,
Yeah.
they wouldn't understand any bit of it, or have any way of understanding it.
Right.
But when you send a person like that, or Buddha, or somebody else,
Right.
to explain the ways and the way to be and things like that, not all the other crap that comes with it, but the messages that came through those people, then you activate the love in the body, and the love is the magical key.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Love is the highway. The heart is the highway to all dimensions. Yeah. And everything we can experience. I believe that.
That's really funny too, because if people that know me now hear me talking about love, they don't find that in the picture anywhere. You know?
Which I do want to get into some of your other stuff if you feel like it, about the child trafficking. I think we'll take a quick break, and I'm gonna check the camera here, and then we can get back and cover some of that stuff.
Okay.
All right, so we'll be right back. Okay, guys, we're back. So we're just gonna go for a few minutes longer, not terribly long. And I just wanted to discuss, he's wearing this endingchildsexslavery.org t-shirt, which is the only shirt he owns, by the way. But so Zaysan, before he was an ET contacting an experiencer, he was running a child rescue. And I think you're one of the only private contractors that are successful in doing this, and you have one of the largest organizations at this point. And you've saved how many children by now?
Well, over 3,600 so far.
Okay, 3,600, and that's primarily overseas for the most part. And that's because you're not technically allowed to rescue children here?
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Well, in the United States, a private citizen can't go out and rescue these children because you're in violation of so many different laws. And for the longest time, it's been very, very difficult for that. The process, because the police didn't want to get involved, the time it would take, and the overtime, and just paperwork, bureaucracy, and all that. Well, thank God for Trump, especially now, because he in his first term, he enacted legislation that actually allowed law enforcement to take action. And it's evolved since then, since he's been in here. And I think it's rescued like 300,000 kids from trafficking or trafficked victims. So it's working.
Since he's passed that legislation, so since these guys have been given a green light to go, instead of, I guess the opposite would have been, they were kind of protecting the traffickers because it was obviously corruption.
Yeah. Well, you go police department, nothing against these these people, but how the bureaucracy works. You got to get approval and for overtime and stuff like that. Then you have to have somebody go in there and physically see the thing. And the funny thing is that I'm explaining all this to a sheriff that was at a human trafficking event. And so he called me out. He said, "No, that's not true." And I said, "So, okay, let's go to LAX. I took him to LAX. I told him how the girls would come out, how many people would be with them, man and female, and how they would be holding all their passports. And then we would walk with them, and I'd tell them what type of van would be picking them up and taking them somewhere. And I would tell him what they would be explained to at that time. That's when the kids would find out what they were actually here for. And then what they do is they hook up with a realtor, and that's got mansions that he knows are going to be unoccupied for a while, and he'll lease them out for 2 weeks. And then before any police activity, even if they knew that all this was happening, before they could even become active, they've already moved to another location. And what they do is they send it out. Sometimes they sell the girls, sometimes they just rent them out and those sort of things. But they got the method down. There's no way they can really be caught. And even though that Trump has allowed for the agencies, FBI and such, to go after these, there's also requirements to meet, and there's so many requirements. Like, there has to be at least 20 kids involved, and we have to have descriptions and definitions, and if all that passes the goo, then they'll put you on the list to be investigated, which is probably going to be over because there are so many. But I can't believe how well they're doing already just with what it is. And still, the citizens can't really be involved. We can point it out, say, "Hey, go check this out," and hope something happens.
Right. So you were telling me about something that occurred down on our border, so that would, I guess, be technically here in the States.
Yeah.
So what did you see there, and what's happening even to this day that most people are largely unaware of?
Yeah, well, like one of our first times ever, somebody actually called us to ask us for help, and so we looked at it, and yeah, it's illegal, right? But on the border, there is no law. And like when we went down there, when we went in the first time, we had 3 Hummers, and all privately owned. And what happened was they opened up on us with 50 caliber, and it was just decimating the Hummer. And one of our guys got hit, but it wasn't bad because it had passed through the steel and stuff. And so we got out of there, and we returned. And this time we silenced those 50 calibers, and we ran into a border patrol guard, and he told us, he goes, "I really don't care what you do out here." He goes, "Just have respect for the dead, because there's thousands of bodies in this 20 square mile area." And it was absolutely true. And what we did was we went there because we knew that there were roaming children, because as the kids come across the border, what they do is they charge them to bring a kid, because a kid makes it easier for them to cross the border. Well, that was kind of in the wash, but the people that were crossing didn't know that, so they get to charge them more money. And then when they come across the border, they would abandon the kids. And so these kids would be wandering. I mean, little kids, right? And so we drove around and just started collecting kids. And this organization across the border actually brought in buses, and they told us where the buses would be. So we would round these kids up, and we'd be, be careful. There was bodies everywhere. And we would make our way back to the destination to put the kids in the buses. And then we invented these places too. By the way, we knew that these were legitimate places, and they truly wanted to do something to help. And so we also got to witness what we had heard about but hadn't seen yet, was the rape trees. And that is these particular areas where the cartel will bring the people through, and then they abuse the women. Like at least 70% of the women are abused, and children. And a lot of them die in the process, what they do. And what they'll do is they take the clothes off of them and throw them up in the tree. And those are designated rape trees to let the other cartels know, where they did this or whatever. And so it's just sick, the things that we witnessed. But in those 3 days, we got 300 kids just roaming, all by themselves. It was unbelievable.
Wow. And that was what year?
That was just recently.
Oh, really?
Just before Trump took over.
Wow.
Because it all ended when Trump took over. But, what the idea of the kids is that when they knew that they would be abandoned when they come across the border, and they knew what the Border Patrol, they didn't have enough people. They had far too less of people, because they were processing people without any really validation or anything of who they were as they crossed into the border. But they had to process them. They had to give them some kind of paperwork. And so the more that there were kids and the more the people that they were processing, they couldn't patrol the border at all. So it was wide open. And so everything was coming through. I mean, we saw abandoned drug stuff that was left out there that we could have picked up, and
Right.
it was insanity.
Wow. So that's it's heartwarming to know that it's come to a stop at the border. I mean, it's a shame it took this long, but at least we're seeing some progress now. You were telling me about, so overseas you work primarily because that's where you can legally and make a difference.
Not necessarily legally,
Okay.
but we can create our own laws.
Okay.
And I have human law. That's what we go by.
Right. And you have how many people technically working for you?
Well, there's nobody's paid, and we have over 500 volunteers, every race, religion, everything. It's just amazing, and they all work together on this stuff. And basically what they do is they search and they find these brothels, and then they'll do recon for us in a sense. They'll sit there and the date and times, who comes, who goes, who's running the show, and possibly the condition of the kids that are inside. And so, and they give us everything, right? Who the neighbors are and stuff like that. Because in a lot of these places, they're, shanties, right? And they're metal, whatever they can find to build these little rooms. And so they collect the data for us, the intel, and then they notify us if there's an emergency rescue. Because we're so limited on funds, it costs money at whatever we do. You can't avoid that. And so if we have enough money, then we do a rescue. If this emergency comes up, I scrap and I raise the money, whatever it takes to get in there and do it. And what we do is we have I have a lot of contractors, military contractors, and I also have a lot of ex-soldiers and so forth. And they volunteer 100%. And like a lot of the contractors make a lot of money. And so we have to take these kids to a home or an orphanage or such, and we have to, it takes us at least 6 months to vet them because most of them are false. They're not real. And so we have to find the ones that are actually real. And then they're going out of their way to take these kids in, and they'll tell us how much room they have. And we don't have the funds to, even though it costs like $20 a month to support one of these kids, there's no way we can come up with that kind of money and keep rescuing, right? And so they take these orphanages, suffer true people, and they take these kids in when they can have them. And we require them like to learn English and to learn basic math and skills, right? Plus we also give them a skill in this process. That's what we require of the place. But a lot of times, like when they really need something, the wall falls or the kitchen breaks, the contractors have money and they'll put money in to take care of that. And so anyways, they do their own schedule so that every one of the places where our kids are, they have at least 2 guards there 24/7. And so thank God that they take care of that. But so we get a call, a volunteer tells us about a rescue or something, and then they let me know. And so we gather who we have in the area and how many people we may need and do all the intel and the logistics of that. And then we look at it together. I use Viber, and I'm talking to them and the commander and designated what does what. And then we come up with a plan and we argue it out until we're satisfied with it. And then just like, when you got a plan, that's when you make God laugh because, things can go south really quick. But these guys are so skilled and they know each other. And so we know who would fall back on this or that in order if we have to deviate from the original. Then we get them to a safe house, which I've acquired. And in that safe house, they're looked over. They're bathed, they're given new clothes. And when we can afford it, we give them a little stuffed animal, something that they own themselves. And when we do that, we hope to have a medical person there. Usually it's just a nurse or something, and the nurses over there aren't quite skilled like the ones here. But at least we get a good evaluation and make sure that we can transport them to their next location where they're going to be. And also we try to have a female there, whether it be one of the soldiers or somebody else, to explain to the kids what's going on in the local language. And then we'll actually take them to a place. And what happens when they get into that place, like I already told you the requirements we have for them. Well, therapists or anything like that doesn't work. And so we have ex-slaves that will talk to them until the point that they break them to where they open up and they start to express themselves about things. And at that moment, they become so proud of the scars that they bear that they're more powerful than anybody else, right? And things like that. And beyond that, we give them jobs inside the orphanage, like chores and things like that. And they really love that stuff. Plus, we give them a uniform, and that is their prized possession. And then in the orphanages, we remove all the doors, and each kid gets their own cabinet or dresser thing, one box. And that stuff is theirs. Whatever they put in there, like the toy that we give them, they keep them and they have them. And since there's no doors, there's no fear, right? And then we give them a skill, something that's local. And these kids aren't looked down upon and labeled if they don't make 4 times the amount of the average person. And in these areas, the average money is about $150 a month. So we give them a skill to meet that 4 times, and they're respected. So, and every one of them always end up coming back to help out. Yeah. Also about volunteers, like a lot of people want to volunteer, and that's all really good and everything, but I tell them it's the minimum is 6 months, but we prefer a lot more than that because these kids have had so many people come in and out of their lives. We don't want that to keep happening. So we give them something that's steady.
That's beautiful, all of that. And so these kids then, you check back in on them frequently after they've gotten a job somewhere and stuff and they're doing okay?
I know where every one of them is.
Yeah. So they're not getting pulled back in.
No.
Right.
And we don't remove them from the culture, which is a mistake of a lot of them do, because an organization will come in and they'll reinvent them in a way, and then they run out of money and they leave. Right. So we don't do that.
Yeah. That makes sense. Keep them what they're comfortable with.
Yeah.
So whenever you go in and rescue children, obviously, like I don't know how each operation probably is very specific to the situation, but so you'll go in and silence the guards, for lack of a better term, and then you'll pull the children out. But what's stopping those guards or that team, that ring, from continuing the traffic? Nothing. But you're still saving the children.
Not really, but what we do is we make them lose face. Like we'll strip them naked, duct tape them, drag them out in the street. You know, little things like that may deter them, because then they're used material. They probably ain't going to get another job.
Right.
But we also take down the bosses by money, right? We cost them more money than it's worth to them. You know, but they keep always trying to resurface, but we make it very difficult for them in that way, just because of the actions that we take upon them in their businesses. So we win in the end, but you'll never ever stop it. Ever.
Right. Yeah, it's like you'll never kill all the mosquitoes.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. Unfortunately, we laugh, but it's it's that bad. And why it's how it's gotten that bad, is beyond me. But and the awareness, I don't even think most of the world understands how bad it is.
We had an app at the border. You could buy a girl by age.
Really?
Yeah.
They had an app?
Yeah.
Who did?
The cartel.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And they would deliver the girls.
Wow.
That's how bad it was.
Yeah, I've heard that they're sold on websites and stuff like that too. Alibaba.com was one of them. But I want to go back to, so you spoke at a conference, and the last night we were doing a speaker panel, and you weren't participating in a panel because there was a rescue happening simultaneous and no one knew. But during that period, you rescued, 14 children? Mm-hmm. Can you explain what was going on while we were up there, having a speaker panel?
Yeah, just like I talked about, there was a emergency rescue, and they contacted me because I have to approve. And so I created the organization. The guys were already gathered while they were waiting on me to get to the phone. And so we discussed it, and it was a pretty simple operation, the way we had to go about it. But we put together the plan and everything. Everything is 4 to 7 minutes. And sometimes it's a little shorter, sometimes it's a little longer for in and out, because it's a military operation. We have a no-kill policy, but we also have preservation of life too, which hasn't occurred yet. At one time we had to bury ourselves in order to avoid being seen. But yeah, so basically I ran that through, and then they rallied. They were already on the right route to the place because they knew it was going to go on. And so I got on there and gave them the go. And so I then was able to watch and see that everything was good. And once they were clear of that and on the way to the safe house and we didn't have any shadows, I was able to return.
Right. So, yeah. So that's how it happens. Mm-hmm. At any given time of day, I guess, you get a notification.
Yeah.
And then that means you have to stop what you're doing.
Yeah.
And this is
do it.
Yeah. Right. So one last story I'd like you to tell, because I thought it was interesting. You, and I don't know if this was with anything to do with the trafficking or not, but whenever you just volunteered yourself to walk out to those guards, was that on a trafficking rescue? Or that was something different?
That was when I was a contractor and was, there was no way I could die.
Right. So you volunteered yourself to be the distraction so that they can take out the team.
Yeah, I was insane. I was getting to that point of insanity.
Yeah.
So I understood. I understand the levels, right? Of where we can go and where we can't go.
Yeah.
And so I keep the team in that place too. And this is one interesting thing is, I don't know how it happens. It's some sort of miracle, but almost all the people that I accept in are broken in some way through what they've witnessed and everything, doing their work. And when they come to me, it's either the first or the second rescue. They have no more PTSD.
Yeah.
They're completely healed. And I don't quite understand it. I have an idea, but I think it's the beauty of replacing horror in their mind with something far more powerful, which is love.
Yeah.
And they see you, and it's so cool when I'm able to see them actually pick one of those kids up and hold them. And it's just amazing. You can see and feel the energy that's coming through that isn't visible on the screen, right?
Right.
And so it works for all of us.
And you mentioned going in, and I guess, so you typically are you're rescuing these children from what you would call the employees, but not the bosses.
Right.
One time you went after the triad, and you got 40 children right off from under them.
Yeah.
Can you tell that story? Because it's just very satisfying.
Well, events led to us retaliating in a sense. You know, that's a bad word in a sense, but it was like, we're going to show them something. And we went right to where their headquarters was, and they had a couple brothels there. And we cleaned out the brothels. I think it was 60 some kids or something like that in there, right from underneath their noses.
And how would you get in and out without them being seen?
Because
being seen.
we were being obvious. You know, you can be completely invisible if you're not wearing military gear or anything like that. You fit the environment, and then you work through the environment. And we already had the intel on it. We've always had the intel on it, you know, so we knew what to be looking for and everything. And that's the last place they'd ever look for somebody to come and try to shut it down.
Right.
And we watched all their security move towards the front of the building where the headquarters was, in that area, in that location. And so we just snuck in the back door in a way and removed everybody.
Wow. And you got away safely.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's incredible. Well, is there any last messages you'd like to leave us with about any of this stuff?
Oh, well, if you want to find us, you know, this is the easiest way, endingchildsexslavery.org. But our name is The Quest, ECSS, and .org. And I also have a Facebook page, The Quest, ECSS. So I also post on my personal thing, but also I have the page specific for that. And you can learn about it. You can read all of our stories. I have a website too. On the website, I list all of our rescue stories, so you can see how we do things. You know,
Right.
The dates may be a little off, but there's reasons for that. But
Right.
you'll see how we do things and what our tally is.
Right. That's beautiful. So that link, we'll put that in the description. Thank you for joining us. Absolutely fascinating stuff, and thank you for what you do. And thank you guys for tuning in. And until next time, have a great evening. Good night. Hey guys, Journey to Truth is going to Hawaii. Join us in 2026 for Journey to Truth's first ever vacation conference on the Big Island at the beautiful Queen Emma Community Center in Kona. Enjoy Hawaii as we travel to sacred sites and connect with our Lemurian past and reactivate the land. It's time to get our bodies moving and take a boots on the ground approach to the awakening. We'll also be making a trip to Volcano National Park to pay our respect to Pele, the goddess of fire. We'll then journey to the water for an ocean adventure with our multi-dimensional aquatic family. We'll gear up and head to the harbor as we set sail under the sun for an activating day on the water while we experience the Hawaiian ocean life like never before. Enjoy Hawaiian sunsets and walks on the beach while connecting with soul family and learning a few things from our amazing lineup of speakers. Aloha! Grab your ticket today at journeytotruth.online and join us for this once-in-a-lifetime activating getaway.